Rebecca, so which firms' debt sales have been most affected?
Well, we've seen debt sales from state-owned enterprises in Henan and Shaanxi in particular really tumble. We've also seen bonds from kind of local SOEs and SOEs in Yunnan also under an enormous amount of pressure. Now, these kind of firms from these sort of quite leveraged provinces were already sort of weighed down when we saw a spate of state-linked firms default at the end of last year. However, we've seen again this year, despite a lot of local governments trying to step in and trying to make kind of positive comments and positive supportive measures that their SOEs will be supported, we're still seeing them really struggle to come to market. And of course, that can prompt a really sort of vicious cycle. Now, as much as Beijing wants to allow some of these sort of laggard firms to fail, if funding channels totally dry up, it also becomes inevitable that you see this sort of wave of failures and you potentially risk prompting sort of contagion.
You know, the recent turmoil that we've seen at Huarong has really kind of created more scrutiny when it comes to the procedural ways that global investors can get access to some of these distressed assets, right? We are now seeing a pilot program with Hong Kong that might seek to improve that access.
Absolutely, yes. It's a really important development in terms of kind of offshore creditors based in Hong Kong or overseas global creditors who hold the kind of offshore or dollar debt. Essentially, courts in Shanghai, Shenzhen and Xiamen are going to be able to recognize insolvency proceedings in Hong Kong and sort of vice versa. And what that means essentially is global investors will be given sort of a door into mainland China and be able to potentially kind of put forward their claims. So ultimately, this should really help sort of the prospects of a creditor getting their money back when they run into trouble. And the broader thing to remember here, as Huarong highlights, the ability of offshore investors to retrieve their money and even just to protect their assets in a restructuring environment is just one sort of thing that Huarong has really raised. The fundamental question also, of course, is the nature of offshore investments and whether they are more vulnerable than onshore peers.
So how much have SOEs reneged on bond payments so far?
It's quite a significant chunk. I think what we've seen is that SOEs are continuing to drive overall defaults. Defaults have crossed the 100 billion yuan mark again for a fourth consecutive year. What we're really watching, I suppose, is whether or not we see real estate firms actually take over. The kind of move to curb deleveraging in that sector has also really prompted a sharp rise in the number of real estate firms that are defaulting. A fresh defaulter came through just yesterday.